His Excellency Prime Minister Khairala Sanana Gusmao, my Prime Minister, that's what my president said, that's his your Prime Minister too. Samantha Powers, Ambassador Constantio Pizzo, and Gabriela, Ambassador Caprice, so I think she's still with but on behalf of my wife Rosa and I, and the Embassy of Indonesia, and also the Embassy of Timor Leste, Ambassador Constantio and Gabriela Pinto, I'd like to welcome all of you to tonight's event, where we are very honored to pay special tribute to our special guest, His Excellency Prime Minister Khairala Sanana Gusmao. I met Bapak Sanana Gusmao in 1999. Back then, I had a special role as a liaison, secret liaison between the late Foreign Minister Ali Alatas and Bapak Sanana Gusmao. And messages were passed, and I remember at the time I did not know, I heard so much about you, and I did not know what to expect, but the moment I met Prime Minister Sanana Gusmao, back then I knew he was an extraordinary person, extraordinary. And my guess was right. After 1999, he played a very special role in the political process in East Timor and now Timor Leste. And he showed a great transformation from revolutionary to statesman. And more than that, from leader to healer. And Timor Leste needed plenty of that. And I think if you think about South Africa, you think of Mandela, you think about India, you think about Mahatma Gandhi, you think about Timor Leste, you think about Sanana Gusmao. The Prime Minister has been very instrumental in promoting reconciliation and development for Timor Leste, and he does it with such grace. The one thing that strikes me most about his leadership, there is absolutely no hatred in his heart. He's forward looking. He is, including my wife, who seems smitten by the Prime Minister. But I also promised I want to convey the special greetings and warm message of my president. Spoken by phone yesterday, and I told him that I would hold this event, and he sends his best to you. You know very well that Indonesia and Timor Leste have been very lucky because we have two leaders who are committed to the relationship, who are committed to a forward-looking and transformed relationship. And if the relationship between Indonesia and Timor Leste is as it is now, it is because of your hard work and your commitment to friendship and peace. One final point about Timor Leste. Timor Leste has a very special or unique role in the international affairs. I know we don't hear much about Timor Leste these days, but Timor Leste is a young nation. Timor Leste is a young democracy. That alone, carries a special identity, a special profile for Timor Leste. And Timor Leste has, because of its being a young democracy and a young nation, and a small nation also, has moral authority when it comes to issues such as MDG, Millennium Development Goals, poverty, climate change, where the interests of that group of nations need a voice. And Timor Leste has been very capable in voicing up the voices of the small countries. And that is why Timor Leste is very fortunate to have leaders such as President Amasorta and Prime Minister Khairala Sanana Gusmao. On behalf of everyone, I don't want to speak too long. I want to say thank you for coming. We are so honored to have you. We wish you all the luck with all the meetings that you had today and also tomorrow. And enjoy your time, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And now we would like to kindly invite Mr. William Eichhorn, Vice President of the International Government Affairs, ConocoPhillips, to deliver his remarks.
Excellencies, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much for this opportunity, Ambassador, to make a few brief remarks. On behalf of the American business community, I wanted to welcome you to Washington, D.C., and we're hoping that you have a very warm and productive visit here in town. And I wanted to say one thing. I think it is very appropriate, and the Americans in the audience will certainly recognize the significance of this, but this being President's Week in the United States, I think it is very appropriate this is the week that you are here. We celebrate during President's Day and President's Week the founding presidents of our country, and by all respects, you would be the George Washington of your country. And I looked up an interesting statistic, which I think is important. In 2002, when you were elected, Mr. Prime Minister, to the office of presidency, you won with approximately 380,000 votes, 82% of the vote. In our first election in 1789, we of course used an electoral system. And while George Washington won 100% of the electoral votes, there were only 38,000 popular votes cast in that election. So you won with 10 times more votes. With that, I will conclude my remarks, and again, welcome to Washington, and we wish you a very productive visit here. Thank you.
And now we kindly invite the Senior Director for Multilateral Affairs at the National Security Council, Ms. Samantha Power.
Hi there, I am Samantha Power. I have the privilege of being President Obama's Human Rights Advisor, his advisor on multilateral affairs. I've been asked to say a few words on behalf of President Obama in order to welcome a historic figure and a global treasure, Shanana Gusmao, to our nation's capital. I extend this welcome after myself having had the privilege of being welcomed by the then President, Shanana Gusmao, to the capital of a free and independent East Timor. I will say that it was only Shanana Gusmao who could pull me away from the office this week of all weeks. You can imagine, as someone who does human rights for a living and political reform for a living, that these are very, very heady times in the Middle East, in Libya, and elsewhere. They're breathless times, times of profound challenge, obviously, but also almost transcendent opportunity. And these are events, I think, that Shanana Gusmao and the people of East Timor can relate to in ways that most of us here tonight just simply cannot, because we weren't around in George Washington's time. I think, again, for Prime Minister Gusmao to be watching the television, it's just must be a very, very different experience. I mean, you, Mr. Prime Minister, know in a way that we never will what it means to put your life on the line in order to achieve freedom and universal rights for your people. And I think you, of all people, also know the question, of course, that lingers in everyone's mind, our courage and a stubborn longing for dignity enough. Are they enough? And of course, it's the responsibility of all of us to reinforce those impulses and ensure that they are enough. But I would note, in addition to, again, the great historic timing of Prime Minister Gusmao's visit to Washington at a time of such tumultuous change and opportunity in one part of the world, I would note that Indonesia, too, is one of the few countries whose people can relate so personally to these events. Again, you know, I'm sure Dino and many of you here today have asked yourself the question, those of you who went out into the streets in 1998 and brought down a dictatorship, what does it mean to put your life on the line to achieve freedom and universal rights for your people? Our courage and a stubborn longing for dignity enough. Those questions that you must have had, and to watch history turn in the way that it did, and the arc of justice, the arc of history bend, as we believe it always does in the end, toward justice. And the fact, and I want to comment on this and pause on it, that Shenana Gusmao, the Prime Minister of a free and democratic East Timor, is being celebrated tonight in the embassy belonging to a free and democratic Indonesia, is but one testament to the power of democratic change, and the contribution that the spread of freedom, rights, dignity, opportunity make to peace and stability among nations, and not simply just what it serves in terms of the rights and the freedoms of individuals within nations. And I ask, how many people here tonight think that these two nations would have forged the relationship that they now have, that kind of culminates in this evening in Washington, if one were free and the other unfree? And a region divided in many ways is like a house divided. It cannot stand forever. But these two democracies have laid this inspiring foundation for a democratic, stable, and prosperous partnership, but also for a democratic, stable, and prosperous future. Let me just briefly describe the qualities that President Obama and the American people most admire in Prime Minister Gusmao. And he's kind of used to this, but we'll give it a special American flavor. He's such a beloved global figure. The first and obvious one feature of his life is courage, just unflinching courage. At any time he could have left East Timor. Many would have been very glad to see him go, but he stayed with his people and, of course, was willing to sacrifice his freedom for theirs. Second, a focus on the future, and the ambassador got at this in his remarks, the future of his people. I know that when then private citizen Shenana Gusmao went back to Dili in October of 1999, a free man for the first time in his homeland since his imprisonment in 1992, thousands of Timors flocked to the docks to hear what the great wise man and poet would say to them. And what he said very simply, and it wasn't necessarily speaking to the impulses in the hearts of those who had gathered, is he said, all of us must try to let go of the bad things they have done to us. Tomorrow is ours. Tomorrow is ours. And again, this is, I think, what the ambassador described as well. I think Prime Minister Gusmao, as citizen, as president, as prime minister, has always known and acted upon the recognition that East Timor's children will judge him on the basis of the tomorrows that he helps create. And one of his favorite lines is, "Be free, including from hatred." And that is just something that has so underscored his leadership across the island and the region and the world. Third, and there are only five, a huge heart. This guy has the biggest heart. It's no secret, really, that he's a very emotional fellow. His poems and letters from prison captured not only the hearts of his people, but the hearts of many around the world. And I don't know how many heads of state have won internationally recognized poetry prizes. I will say President Obama has won a Grammy for this book on tape, so I don't know, but his literary talents even stand up over the course of time. But this emotion has translated into an incredible empathy for his people, and that he's just still so singularly a person of the people of East Timor. He's a man of the people, learning from his people and continuing to bring this ethic of service. Fourth quality that, again, we all admire so much is his patience. And this is something that I think East Timor can really help teach the people of Egypt and Tunisia as that partnership grows, and just as the people of Indonesia, I think, can teach this. First, it was the 24 years of resistance and having the patience to soldier on through that. Then several years of what then President Gusmao referred to as the second occupation, which was the United Nations occupation of East Timor. before its full independence in 2002. He wasn't expecting that period to last quite as long as it did. But now, even more importantly, I think through the tough years after independence, when there's no question that the democracy dividend sometimes takes longer to really be realized than many of us would like, and that I know you and your people would like. But keeping that patience and that focus on the end game is something you have done brilliantly. And then finally, and this gets to something that the ambassador closed with as well, one of the things that we most admire in Xanana and in President Ramos Horta is a willingness to take East Timor to a position where it leads beyond its borders, and it does share the incredible pearls of wisdom that can only be gained through tough experience. And I'll just give you one example again before closing. Not long ago, Iran was posed to take a seat on the board of a new UN organization known as UN Women. And Prime Minister Gusmao and President Ramos Horta learned of this quite late in the sort of jockeying and the race for membership. And when they heard this, given the fact that the people of Iran were trying to step up and contest the stoning death of a woman who had been sentenced to stoning for adultery, and so the idea of them being on the board of a new UN organization, UN Women, seemed a little bit problematic. But at the last minute, with very little time to spare, the Prime Minister and the President decided that East Timor should put its candidacy in there and create a competitive race, which of course is not always the most popular thing to do in any regional bloc. And though they had very little notice because of the incredible records on women's rights and on human rights generally, East Timor was able to prevail and deny Iran a seat on UN Women, and more importantly, exert its own leadership within an organization that really needs the perspective of the Timorese. And here I harken back to something President Obama said in his UN General Assembly address, which was a kind of plea to what he called those nations who emerged from tyranny and inspired the world in the second half of the last century, Indonesia and Timor being great examples of that. Don't stand idly by, don't be silent. When dissidents elsewhere are in prison and protesters are beaten, recall your own history. And this is the money line, because part of the price of our own freedom is standing up for the freedom of others. And Xanana Gusmao and East Timor, Indonesia, the leadership of President Yudhoyono, we are seeing East Timor and Indonesia step up in ways that are truly inspiring beyond their borders and offering real succor and real wisdom to people who really need it right now around the world. So thank you so much for having me here tonight, and to express on behalf of President Obama our deep appreciation for this global treasure and our lasting friendship with the country of East Timor and that with Indonesia. Thank you.